Let's talk. Let's talk, understand, support, inspire. Let's Talk is a support network that has been set up by a group of Muslim sisters for all the sisters of the Muslim community. The aim to give a platform to our sisters to discuss general topics about our children, our youth, daily Islamic reminders, and topics which are not widely discussed or always misunderstood in our community, fighting stereotypes and cultural stigma. If you would like to get involved, you can contact us via our Instagram or Facebook page at Let's Start Talk 20. Let's Talk Screen Time, Series 2, Episode 1. Today on Let's Talk, we will be discussing the health effects of screen time on children. All the research that will be provided on today's episode will be linked in the description bar below. The health effects of screen time on children, a research roundup. Screen time is associated with inattention problems in preschoolers, results from the childbirth cohort study. This study analyzes parent-reported data about screen time and behavioral issues such as inattention and aggressiveness for a sample of 2,322 Canadian preschool-aged children. Researchers found that over 13% of kids in the sample were exposed to over 2 hours of screen time each day, including watching TV and DVDs, playing video games, or using a computer, tablet, or mobile device. The effects: kids who were exposed to more screen time showed significantly increased behavioral problems at 5 years, the authors write. Briefly, children who watched more than 2 hours of screen time per day had increased externalizing, for example, attention and behavior, internalizing, meaning anxiety and depression, and total behavior problems scores compared to children who watched less than 20 minutes. Attention problems, in particular, were apparent in children who had over 2 hours of screen time each day. Mobile media device use is associated with expressive language delay in 18-month-old children. Toddlers who use mobile devices daily are more likely to experience speech delays, according to an analysis of parent-reported data on 893 children in the Greater Toronto Area of Canada. While 78% of parents said their kids spent no time on mobile devices, the other 22% reported a range of 1.4 to 300 minutes daily, with a median of 15.7 minutes. In total, 6.6% of parents reported expressive speech delays, meaning late to begin talking. The prevalence of other communication delays, such as lack of use of gestures and eye gaze, was 8.8%. The researchers found a positive association between mobile device use and expressive speech delays. An increase in 30 minutes per day in mobile media device use was associated with 2.3 times increased risk of parent-reported expressive speech delay, the authors write. Other communication delays were not linked to device use. The researchers suggest the connection between device use and expressive speech delays might be explained by the fact that past research has shown infants having difficulty applying what they learn across different contexts. An alternate explanation is that these children who spend more time with devices might have less exposure to speech from caregivers. Association between screen time and children's performance on a developmental screening test. Is screen time detrimental to child development? This study looks at data collected from 2,441 mothers and children in Canada at 3 different time points, when the children were 2, 3, and 5 years old. The researchers were interested in the total number of hours the children spent looking at screens each week, as well as their progress in various developmental areas such as fine motor skills, communication, and problem solving. The average amount of screen time for the age groups in the study: 17, 25, and 11 hours of television per week for 2, 3, and 5-year-olds respectively. The researchers found that kids who spent more time watching screens at ages 2 and 3 did worse on developmental tests at the subsequent time points of 3 and 5 years. To our knowledge, the present study is the first to provide evidence of a directional association between screen time and poor performance on development screening tests among very young children, the authors write. The researchers suggest that excessive screen time leads to developmental delays rather than the other way around. negating the notion that children with developmental delays might receive more screen time to manage their behavior. The three-phase data capture supports this explanation because children with greater screen time at one point go on at the next time point to have poorer developmental progress, but children with poor developmental performance at an earlier time point do not receive increased screen time at later time points. Association between screen media use and academic performance among children and adolescents. This publication consists of both a systematic review and meta-analysis of research on the relationship between screen time and academic performance. The authors identified 58 studies to include in the systematic review, which provides a summary of the qualitative effects of screen time. 30 of these studies were included in the subsequent meta-analysis, which the authors used to calculate the effect size of screen time on academic performance. The 58 studies in the systematic review included 480,479 participants ranging from 4 to 18 years of age. The articles were published between 1958 and 2018 and represent the efforts of researchers around the world. The studies looked at computer, internet, mobile phone, television, and video game use individually, as well as overall screen time. Outcomes of interest included school grades, performance on academic achievement tests, academic failure data, or self-reported academic achievement or school performance. The key finding from the systematic review was that in most of the papers reviewed, as time spent watching television increased, academic performance suffered. Relationships were less clear-cut for other types of screen use. The meta-analysis, which focused on a subset of 106,653 participants from the larger sample, did not find an association between overall screen time and academic performance. When the authors analyzed the data by type of activity, they found television watching was linked to poorer overall academic performance as well as poorer language and mathematics performance separately. Time spent playing video games was negatively linked with composite academic performance scores too. Analyzing the data further by age, the authors found that time spent with screens had a larger negative association with academic performance for adolescents than children. The findings from the systematic review and meta-analysis suggest that each screen-based activity should be analyzed individually because of its specific association with academic performance, the authors conclude. This study highlights the need for further research into the association of internet, computer, and mobile phone use with academic performance in children and adolescents. These associations seem to be complex and may be moderated and/or mediated by potential factors such as purpose, content, and context of screen media use. The authors suggest that educators and health professionals should focus screen time reduction efforts on television and video games for their negative connections to academic performance and potential health risks due to their sedentary nature. Screen time is associated with adiposity and insulin resistance in children. This study looks at the relationship between screen time and type 2 diabetes risk factors, like being severely overweight, among 4,495 school children in the UK between the ages of 9 and 10. The short of it, kids who spent over 3 hours daily on screen time were less lean and more likely to show signs of insulin resistance, which can contribute to the development of type 2 diabetes, compared with their peers who reported 1 hour or less of screen time each day. Black children were more likely to spend over 3 hours daily on devices compared with their white and South Asian peers. 23% of black children fell into that group, compared with 16% of white children and 16% of South Asian children. Digital media and sleep in children and adolescents. This report summarizes 67 studies looking at associations between screen time and sleep health, adequate sleep length and quality in children and adolescents. The main takeaways: a majority, 90% of the studies included in a systematic review of research on screen time in children and teenagers found adverse associations between screen time and sleep health, primarily because of later bedtimes and less time spent sleeping. Delving deeper, underlying mechanisms include Time displacement. Think scrolling Instagram for an hour that might otherwise be spent sleeping. Psychological stimulation from content consumed and impacts of screen light on sleep patterns. The upshot? These kids are tired. The previously cited research review also indicates that a majority of studies saw a relationship between tiredness and screen time. Prevalence and likelihood of meeting sleep, physical activity, and screen time. Guidelines among US youth. This study analyzes data from the 2011, 2013, 2015, and 2017 cycles of a nationally administered school-based survey on various health-related behaviors related to the leading cause of death and disability in the US. The researchers were interested in whether respondents met the recommendations for time spent on sleep, physical activity, and screen time given in a day. A total of 59,397 adolescents were included in the dataset. The findings indicate that only 5% of adolescents surveyed met all three guidelines. That is, getting the recommended amount of sleep and physical activity and limiting screen time to less than 2 hours per day. There were disparities among the sample in terms of the odds of meeting all of the recommendations. 16 and 17-year-olds were less likely than those aged 14 and younger to meet all the guidelines. Black, Hispanic, Latino, and Asian participants were less likely to meet the three guidelines than white participants. Overweight and obese participants were less likely to meet the guidelines than normal weight participants. Participants who reported marijuana use were less likely to meet the guidelines than those who did not. Participants who reported depressive symptoms were also less likely to meet all the guidelines. Increase in depressive symptoms, suicide-related outcomes, and suicide rates among U.S. adolescents after 2010 and links to increased new media screen time. This study looks at the relationship between screen time and depression and suicide rates in 506,820 adolescents in the U.S. between 2010 and 2015. The data on screen time use and mental health issues came from two nationally representative surveys of students in grades 8 through 12. Suicide rates were calculated from national statistics collected by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's fatal injury reports. The analysis finds a clear pattern linking screen activities with higher levels of depressive symptoms or suicide-related outcomes, suicidal ideation, that is, thinking about suicide, and attempts, and non-screen activities with lower levels. Among participants who used devices for over 5 hours each day, nearly half, 48%, reported at least one suicide-related outcome. In comparison, 29% of those who used devices for just an hour per day had at least one suicide-related outcome. Overall, during the time studied, suicide rates, depressive symptoms, and suicide-related outcomes increased. Girls accounted for most of the rise. They were more likely to experience depressive symptoms and suicide-related outcomes than boys. They also experienced stronger effects of screen time on mental health. In particular, girls, but not boys, had a significant correlation between social media use and depressive symptoms. Interventions designed to reduce sedentary behaviors in young people. A review of reviews. This review looks at 10 systematic reviews and meta-analysis of research on interventions to reduce sedentary behaviors such as screen time among children and adolescents. The authors found that all of the included reviews determined some level of effectiveness in reducing time spent in sedentary behavior. Effects, however, were small. Interventions tended to be more successful among children younger than 6 years old. Strategies that were effective included restricting access to television through TV monitors, systems that use TV as a reward for physical activity, and behavioral interventions such as setting goals and developing schedules for screen time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe at Let's Start Talk 20 so you do not miss out on our future shows and episodes on Let's Talk Screen Time. If you would like to get involved, you can contact us via our Instagram or Facebook page at Let's Start Talk 20. Also, please take the time out and have a look at our previous episodes and Series 1 regarding Let's Talk Disabilities.